Good morning, everybody. I see we've got some folks logging on, so we're going to give it about 30, 60 seconds here. Just give everyone a minute to log into the Zoom and get settled before we kick off on our panel discussion. So just hang tight for 1 minute. Good morning, those of you that are just joining us. We're going to just give everyone a minute here to get settled in, and we'll start with our panel in about 30 seconds here. So hang tight, and we'll begin our discussion shortly. All right, we're going to get started here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our Business Technology Forum event today. We're glad to bring this discussion to you from our sponsors at Accenture and CDW. And without any further ado, I will hand things over to Bob Kress from Accenture. He's one of the forum co-chairs of our Business Technology Forum here at the Executives Club, and we will begin with today's presentation.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual forum, Creating Competitive Advantage. How can COVID change your business for the better? This is a topic which is a topic on the agenda of many boards and in many C-suites. How can we take advantage of what we're all experiencing through this COVID crisis and come out of this stronger than what we went in? So I'm Bob Kress. I'm a managing director at Accenture Security and co-chair of the Business Technology Forum at the Executives Club with Mark Lafferty from CDW. I'm excited to welcome you for a discussion on how your current technology investments and practices during COVID-19 pandemic can help serve your organization going forward. Today, we'll feature Sheila Talton, CEO and President of Gray Matter Analytics, as the moderator. She will be leading a discussion with Michael Young, who's a Senior Managing Director at Accenture, one of my colleagues, Carmen Obiado, founding partner of Stanton Blackwell, and Gary Sorrentino, Global Deputy CIO at Zoom. Each of the speakers brings a wealth of knowledge and experience today, and I would like to thank all of you for being here with us and taking time out of your busy schedules. Before we get started, I'm going to show you a few ways to interact with the panelists throughout the event. So there are a number of ways to ask questions and chat with fellow attendees during the session. We encourage you to use the chat feature throughout the discussion to share your thoughts. At the same time, you can also use the Q&A feature if you have a question for one of the panelists, and we will be monitoring the Q&A as well as the chat throughout the event. You can also raise your hand, use that feature if you'd like to ask a question to the speakers and to be on video. So in that way, you can be in person for the panel. So thanks again to all of you for joining us today. And thank you to our panelists for taking time to spend with us and to share your insights. I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Sheila Talton, to kick us off in the discussion. Sheila, over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Well, first, let's start off with a quick round of introductions for each of our panelists. And besides what you do and who you are, please tell us a new habit or routine that you've picked up during the COVID-19 shutdown. Start with you, Gary.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to the panel. My name is Gary Sorrentino. I'm the Global Deputy CIO for Zoom, and I also have the privilege of being the chairman for their CISO Council. My background is a little over 40 years in technology. To last 25 were in large banks, such as UBS, Credit Suisse, Citigroup, and my last 14 years were with JP Morgan. And my background's always been some sort of CTO, CISO, CIO in some capacity in technology. One of the unique habits, I learned to cook. I think that's the best thing. I think it used to be getting food on the table was just important enough, but I think I learned to cook and spend a little bit more time on it, that it's not just whatever fits in the microwave works. And so I think that's been one of the newer things for me since COVID started.
Wonderful, wonderful. Carmen?
I'm Carmen Obiado. Thank you, Sheila. I'm a founding partner of Stanton Blackwell, and we are a firm that works with companies that at the intersection between their business and their technology, where often they have decent technology, but it hasn't been implemented well into the business. And so we work with them on that. My background, I spent almost 10 years at Fannie Mae and then at a private equity owned vocational education company. And a lot of my work has been these back office functions and making them work to accelerate the business. And the thing that I have been doing a lot of is I have teenagers, so I like to leave the house. And the only way I can do that is I hike and I walk a lot. I've worn out 2 pairs of running shoes since March. So that's what I've been doing.
Awesome. And Michael? Michael, I think you might be on mute.
Zoom mistake number 1. Gary would be ashamed of me. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Young. I run our intelligent software engineering business for Accenture in North America. So that's all about custom delivery, agile ways of working, cloud migration, modernization, all the fun new toys that we have working with our clients through these tough times. In terms of a habit, I have gotten to be spoiled by my middle child. I was doing a rescue project, and as we say, a lot of us we've not just been working from home, we've been sleeping at work. So trapped in the basement, right, and eating cheese sticks and chocolate milk and crackers. And my daughter came down one day and said, "Dad, you're a grown man. You cannot eat like this." So she negotiated a deal with me where I would pay for her EMT licensing, and she would cook me meals for the next 4 weeks during the project, and everybody won. So I'm really proud of her negotiation skills.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm going to start out with a level setting question for all of you. We're more than 6 months into the global lockdown, and while some organizations are starting to head back to work, many are not, including the tech giants in Silicon Valley. Priorities now are much different than what they were back 6 months ago. And that was when the number one goal was just survival. What do you think organizations should be prioritizing when it comes to their technology investments to make in the next 6 months, both productive and prosperous? Michael, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, so certainly we've gone from survival. We had a lot of clients dealing with dispersing benefits like unemployment insurance agencies, welfare agencies across the nation that just had unprecedented volumes at the time. And so back in the spring, it was all about shoring up the technology, making sure it could perform, making sure that it could deal with the unprecedented demand. I think, a lot of the lessons that we learned with our clients at that time, which were really about, you got to have agile infrastructure. You have to be virtual, right? You have to figure out how to collaborate online and get projects done. A lot of the stuff that we learned through the survival phase, I think, is becoming permanent ways of working as we move forward. We have clients now who are trying to figure out, hey, I don't want my business just to survive. I want to be able to create new products. I want to be able to create new experiences. I maybe want to launch new businesses or something like that. And you have to have an agile technology and infrastructure stack to do that. You have to have an agile organization that embraces business agility, where the business and technology teams are working together. And you have to have the ability to quickly develop products, right, and get them to market. So we are really seeing an acceleration now with many of our clients of not just, I want to get to the cloud, not just I want to get out of my data center, not just I want to get virtual, but also I want to change how my business does things and how we interact with our customers. And cloud technologies and the like and automation are clearly a part of that, Sheila.
Wonderful, wonderful. Carmen.
I think I'll build on what Michael was talking about around collaboration. What we're also seeing is a focus on adoption, security, and usability from the various businesses that are working with the technology. And the security, I mean, Gary can talk till he's blue in the face probably about security, but the security that I'm talking about is more along the lines of what our clients are allowing the businesses to do. So for example, in financial services or other highly regulated industries, they have a lot of questions about, should we allow our people to record meetings, things like that. So it's changing, it's forcing this change in business process, it seems to be, at least with the clients that we're working with, they're actually having to utilize these tech systems in a way that they haven't had to in the past, and their business processes may or may not be well matched to that technology. So we spend a lot of time in that really sort of uncomfortable space in between business and technology, helping them match these new business processes to these technologies, which are now not, they're mandatory. You have to use them.
That's great, and I agree. And Gary.
So I think we can just keep plussing on each other, but I think we're calling this phase rethinking work. In other words, we went through, I love the sleeping at work. We talked about living at work, right? But now I think businesses are rethinking work. And what they're doing is they're falling back and now figuring out, okay, we went through the crazy state. We got people connected. We got people active. We even made some of them productive. And there was a big play on words about whether activity and productivity are the same thing. Being on 14 Zoom calls a day does not make you productive. It makes you active, but maybe not productive. And I think now companies are rethinking. I find that a lot of companies, when we were about 97% of people working from an office before the pandemic, and we're good at that. And then we went to about 100% of the people working from home if you're a knowledge worker, and we're good at that. We really need to think about the hybrid going forward, okay? Because now we have to think about rule changes, as Carmen started, right? In the financial community, there are rule changes. If I work 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off in this new hybrid, I have a different rule set when I'm working there and a different rule set here. But to go back to the part of your question about technology, I think we allowed a lot of things during this transition, okay? The rules are starting to they were slightly bent and now they're getting a lot straighter. And so now what we have to do about our technology is, are we investing in technology that's going to keep us scalable? Are we going to invest in technology that's going to accommodate hybrid? Because as most of the leaders have said, the past is gone and it is not coming back. And anybody who believes that they're going to go back 100% and all of the old business processes and technology is going to take over is not going to be one of those leading companies. And so I think in just rethinking work, it's rethinking technology. There are no more 2-year projects in tech. Right? We proved that we could pivot on a dime and things can get done in 3 months, 2 months, in 1 month. Hey, some companies rolled out our product in a weekend and became productive on Monday morning. So I think the real part now is to say, how do we make sure that we look at technology that's going to keep us agile? It's got to be simple to install. It's got to be simple to maintain. It's got to be simple for the users to use. And in a very, very overused word, it's got to be frictionless. I think that's the direction people have to start looking on their technology.
Great. Now let's talk about the human side of what's the results of COVID. For example, as we all know, the tools, resources, platforms that we just have been talking about that are being used to collaborate and allow us to communicate remotely, they've been here before the pandemic was actually here. The difference now is that people are forced to learn how to adapt and master these without an alternative. How can organizations capitalize on this pivotal moment for their employees' attitudes towards technology to ensure a stronger digital culture moving forward? Which, Gary, some of that you started to touch on, so I'm going to start with you this time.
So I think, thank you. I think we have to look at the world as it is, right? We got to where we are because we had no choice. Now I think what's happening is we really do need to look at our employees and figure out where they belong in that map. We know about generational gaps. I'm a baby boomer, right? We know that millennials are the biggest part and Gen Z's following right behind it. I think the one thing companies need to do for adapting software is they need to listen to their employees. If anybody puts me in a category of I'm a boomer and the category would say I want to go back to work, but you know something? I'm thinking like a millennial. Right? I've changed the way I think. I changed the way I've adopted technology. And so I think now the forward companies we see are working with their employees to figure out there is no more putting technology on the desk, teaching people how it works and walking away because they're going to walk away. The really forward companies now are saying, how do we adopt technology by involving the employees, figuring out what their jobs are? And you're right. The technology we're using today in some form existed before, right? But there wasn't a need, it was a snow day adoption. So what, I go on an audio call because the kids are sick and I have to be home, right? But today we're all fighting for, I need to be online. I need to be productive. And so It's changed a lot. Now, the coming generations, they treat technology a little different and their adoption rate is so much higher. But I really do think today it's about speaking to your employees and understanding what they want, because they are going to go the way they want with or without you. You might as well take the ride with them.
Great. Michael?
Yeah, I think I'll build on Gary's point about engagement and getting employees involved. And for me, a digital culture is not just about having all those cool new tools to be able to quickly build things. It's not just about swiping your credit card in the cloud and picking a cloud provider and setting up, what we call a DevOps pipeline so you can quickly build stuff. It's also about getting the business and IT, getting the employees, as Gary would say, to work together. And I think the companies that are able to successfully move to digital are those that don't just throw stuff over the wall to their IT shop and hope for good results, that something good will come back. And so we're seeing using collaboration tools like Zoom and other things where employees are getting together, where they are active and productive and engaged. I'll add that to Gary's list, and engaged as well and collaborating together, that they're able to create, again, these new products and these new experiences. So for me, it's not just about the tools, it's also about how you get the people to work together in a way to use those tools smartly. So it's a change management problem, right, that we're working with our clients on.
Which is in Carmen's sweet spot. So Carmen?
Yeah, I was about to say, these guys covered a lot of it. There's a couple of things that I would add. One of the mistakes that we see clients making is considering training to be sufficient for adoption. And it's not sufficient. And it's particularly not sufficient. Some of the folks that we work with are highly sophisticated in their subject matter expertise, whether it's scientific or mathematical or some very specific business thing, but they may not be super tech savvy. And just throwing a training at them and saying, do this, is really not what you want. And it not only degrades productivity, it also degrades engagement. And so it's really important when you have valuable employees that are under a ton of stress. I mean, you've got extended families living together, you have children that are at school, at home, you have all of these other things. And so it's really critical. You might have to look at, what does your tech support look like? You might have to look at, is your business really working with your technology folks, or is that relationship getting more fraught? Because there's a lot of blaming of the technology teams, when in reality, it's business that needs to re-engineer some of their processes to match the technology. So how do you bring people together to have those conversations?
Wonderful, thank you. Well, Gary, I'm sure the audience is dying to hear how things have been at Zoom since you've become one of the most widely used platforms, and how have you set your priorities, your team responded to a rapidly increased user base that kind of happened overnight for you guys?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting time at Zoom. I think at the beginning of the journey, our goal was keep people connected. So we worked with some of the larger companies in the world, education systems, healthcare, to say, look, how are we going to help you pivot? And so a lot of the companies, larger companies, deployed Zoom, some of them even from home PCs, to keep people connected. The good news is, Zoom being a cloud-based company, a SaaS-based application, we could pivot very quickly to handle the scale. And I think we did a couple of the right things along the way. Like for Mother's Day, we made the free users unlimited for that day and things like that. So what we've done is we've really taken a look about it. The company is about delivering happiness. And our goal was, we need to deliver happiness. We need to deliver a product people can use easily, right? Frictionless. I know that word is overused, right? And it will scale with them. A great example was the schools. At one time, 90,000 schools are out there, and we were helping them all. And to get people back into class, to get e-learning or online learning or the various different names upon it, was very important. To work with the medical teams to get telehealth. No one wants to sit in a doctor's office anymore. And so these were 2-year plans to get schools to be learning, to get telehealth, and they morphed over 2 months in some cases. So I can tell you at Zoom, it has been about getting people stable. That was our first set. We just had Zoomtopia last week, and we introduced a lot of new functionality. Our next goal was this: how do we use tools like Zoom and video conferencing? And Michael started to touch upon that. How do we create those serendipitous moments at work? That running into someone in the elevator or in the water cooler, right? How do we help people build social capital? right? So the people who have been hired by companies during the pandemic who have never been to a physical building or physically with another employee, right, are running alongside the train. And how do we get them to jump in and use products like Zoom? So I think we went from the challenge of getting people connected, and now we've morphed to the challenge of making sure that the hybrid experience, and there are a couple of things we can talk about later about how we're going to take the different ways we look at people on camera and level off the playing field. And so I think that's what the last 7 months have been about: keeping people connected, making them productive, and now working with our clients as we re-enter the workforce.
Great, yes.
The workspace, I should say.
So Carmen, the company that you founded, Stanton Blackwell, focuses on helping your users and customers to actually adopt in technology and integrate it into their day-to-day work. Have you found that there are some particular nuances or opportunities that companies have been able to use that help with the adoption faster, and then more importantly, for them to be more resilient on the other side of the pandemic?
I think there are a couple of things. First is not everybody has a roadmap, technology or business process roadmap. And that gap really started showing up in the March, April, May timeframe as they're trying to implement things remotely and they don't necessarily have the resources for that. And the net effect of that on the business is that you see that a lot of times either everything's a priority or nothing is a priority. So a real tactical way that folks could do that is really look at assessing their business, figuring out where they're going to be for the next 6 months to a year, and putting a roadmap together that articulates what investments they're going to make in their technology, what the adoption is going to look like, and how they're going to adapt their business process to match that particular technology. So that gap analysis or assessment can lead to a really robust roadmap and be incredibly helpful in getting business and technology on the same page. Another place that I think we've seen some interesting shifts is that with the adoption of some of this technology, both in the business space, but even in the tech space, the mix of employees has had to change. So you might need more project managers than business analysts that you needed before. And we have seen an increase in a need for project management, specifically project and program management, both on the tech side and the business side, because without being in person, there's just not that ability to collaborate as easily as before. People were kind of stuck in their rut. So particularly technology leaders, I would encourage them to look at their staffing mix and figure out if they've got the right staffing mix or if they need to go up in a couple of their areas to better help the business adopt what it is that they need to adopt. So those have been kind of two of the big areas. The other thing that we've seen a lot of is as people, and this is kind of the last 6 months, but I actually think it could set people up for success. As they're adopting some of these SaaS platforms, et cetera, they haven't necessarily done all the work to integrate them and then to integrate their business processes. So spending some time on that gap analysis and exactly how you're going to do that and what's a priority, because not everything can be a priority, particularly when you have all these other business issues that you might be dealing with, declining revenue, changing markets, whatever that looks like. Get really laser focused on the top 2 or 3 things that you're going to do to make the technology more usable for your customers and for your staff. And that's a good use of time. And clients that are engaging in that are really using this. You know, they sort of use the summer, I'll call it downtime. Not everybody had downtime, but they used that disruption to start that process.
Wonderful, thank you. And Michael, I can tell you from my own personal experience, because we focus in a SaaS application around data and analytics, and all of our clients are asking, what cloud provider should I use? What should go to the cloud first? How do I pick how to migrate? That's what you live every day. So why don't you tell our audience a good practical way of how they should look at their cloud migration strategy?
Yeah, so I think, Sheila, it's very easy for consultants like me and maybe even you, Sheila, to run into clients and get all excitable and wave our hands around and talk about how you should go to cloud and you should go serverless and here are the tools you're going to use and oh my gosh, Jenkins and agile ways of working and all that. And we do have many clients, by the way, who have started experimenting. They have small teams that are off, and they'll build a cool, cute new mobile app or something like that, or maybe a little bit of analytics. I think the real challenge, though, we work with large organizations, is how do I change the business and run the business at the same time, right? I'm a CIO. I got to keep the lights on. I can't just have a whole bunch of Scrum developers over there building new stuff. I got to keep the mainframe running or something like that. And so I think the hardest part, Sheila, that we have is how do I get started on this cloud journey? And a few years ago, the answer might have been, well, let's be very thoughtful and put together some strategy and a roadmap, and we'll spend a lot of time doing that. And then maybe we're going to migrate your mainframe by doing this very large, big bang sort of program, and that's going to take 3 years and tens of millions of dollars to do it. And that's not the right answer for many of our clients today. So we're seeing, there are a variety of ways to just get started and move forward besides just sliding your credit card in the cloud. One of those is doing lift and shift, right? And people may have heard about things like virtual machines and containers as ways of packaging up their old stuff in their data center and migrating it to the cloud and starting to take advantage of that elasticity, the scalability in the cloud. Another way is using the SaaS platforms, Sheila, right? You're working with your clients on SaaS. There are platforms out there like Salesforce and Workday and otherwise where you can sort of extend and build new things on top of them. That's a way to get started very quickly. There's new tools that we're now using with our clients that do language translation. So you got a big COBOL mainframey thing. You want to get it out of Java in the cloud. You don't want to spend 3 years doing it. So we can use these tools to actually transform from the old to the new, get it into the cloud, and then start building on that. And then lastly, the thing I get very excited about is there are new architecture approaches where if you really do want to build microservices and you want to have high-speed data event hubs and you want to have data synchronization between legacy and these new microservices, you can do that and keep everything synchronized so that you can change the business, all that new stuff, and run the business at the same time. So I think the whole industry is figuring out new ways, as you say, to help our clients quickly migrate to the cloud and to quickly get benefits.
Great, thank you for that. Well, now we're into our Q&A section of the program. So questions should be coming through the Q&A box at the bottom and not the chat, but we will pick them up if they do come from the chat as well. So let me see. We have a question here. It says, how do you handle Wi-Fi costs and other costs associated with working from home? This is for any one of you on the panel.
So we're a small firm and we've been debating exactly what to do with that. And I think we're probably just going to give a flat amount and allow people to use that in their homes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree. I see most of the companies today trying to figure out, is it a stipend, right? Because you have to remember, a lot of the homes already had some form of Wi-Fi, right?
Mm-hmm.
For kids are still watching Netflix before pandemic, right? But a lot of people elevated their Wi-Fi because they needed to have better bandwidth so the kids can watch Netflix while mom and dad are working and things like that. But I think a lot of the companies we see are looking at some sort of reimbursement, stipend, things like that.
Michael, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just say in our case, right, Accenture has 500,000 employees and all of us are already road warriors in virtual. So to Gary's point, we already have a lot of the technologies at our house, but to help support some of the people who kind of work the back office and stuff like that, we set up additional charge numbers during COVID-19 to help pay for extra Wi-Fi costs and the like.
Another question that we have comes in from Leslie McDavid. Based on your knowledge, what would you recommend for companies to do in order to make a hybrid working model most successful? What would you consider the must-dos or the must-don'ts? Carmen, why don't you start?
I'm going to approach this a little bit less from the technology side for a second, because one of our senior partners is a HR person. A lot of it has to do with the how you collaborate with folks. And for managers in particular, I think this is a really big deal, because particularly if you're more of an introverted manager or you weren't walking around the floor, you got to figure out a way to kind of walk the floor. I do think he has suggested many times open office hours are a great way to do that, so that on the employees' time, they can come to you versus scheduled one-on-ones where they're, coming to you with whatever. So I know I kind of took it away from the technology side, but I do think onboarding is another place that's really critical. I think doing virtual or even hybrid onboarding, there needs to be really clear planning, real understanding of where you're going to comp and benefits. How are you going to get all of your technology set up? How is that going to get shipped to you, or, are you using your own devices? So really clear plans that engage your employees. So Sheila, I know I went more to the HR side of that, but I actually think that, it's like Zoom is a fabulous tool. And some of these tools are fabulous, but it really comes down to the people and how they implement the tools and how they work with their staffs.
Anything, Gary, you'd like to add?
And I do agree with Carmen. I don't think this is a tech question. I think at the end of the day, the must-dos and the must-don'ts is there is no right way right now. We're all treading new ground. And companies who are putting out those edicts and those rules, you can't do that. You have to be very flexible. You have to be able to test and move back. Some companies are trying no meeting Wednesdays, no internal meeting Wednesdays and things like that. I think you have to figure out, as we're going to asynchronous working, which is becoming very big. And asynchronous working means that if you're a manager and you have employees who start at 6 in the morning and work till 4, and then you have employees that start at noon and work till 9, that manager's working from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. So in some cases, it doesn't work. I really do think that the must-don'ts, let's just talk about that, is don't think anything is going to be long-term. Keep being flexible, keep adapting, keep testing, keep changing going forward. Your employees will help you. I do agree with Carmen. I'm a big fan of trying to recreate serendipitous moments. Social capital is so important for new employees. And, I'm 1 year at Zoom, and myself, I've only had the honor of meeting some of them for a very short period of time. So I do find myself maybe running alongside the train a little bit there. And so I think the companies are constantly trying, at least with Zoom, evaluate how we're working in this hybrid environment. And we're not hybrid really yet, right? We still are mostly home, right? The hybrid part of this job is to come. And so we have to realize that where we are right now is not going to be the next new normal. And in my opinion, as I think the next new normal is several new normals. And companies will have to just keep changing as we get that balance, and as we figure out who is working in the office and who, and be ready to pivot back. God forbid there's a fourth wave.
Michael, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I like Gary's word flexible. So I'll throw in 2 words, creative and compassionate. And so by creative, in terms of figuring out how to do things in hybrid ways, I'll draw on an example from our Columbus Cloud Innovation Center. I love the work that they're doing there. We've got 10 2-pizza teams, 8-person teams that get fed by 2 pizzas, but 2 pizza teams, it's an agile phrase, that are all doing extreme programming, pair programming. So this is where you actually have 2 people working together. One's the backseat driver, the other one's doing the typing and all that stuff. And we have actually found, we've done science experiments, that their productivity and quality has actually gone up through the roof. So you're talking about 2 people sitting in front of the same machine. Then COVID hit. So we actually had to be creative, right, and figure out what does that mean? Well, as it turns out, fortunately, there are actually tools out there that allow you with very low latency to have 2 people on a keyboard typing, and you're using your Zoom and your video, and it's almost as good as if they were there together. So I think being creative in how you translate the old ways of working into the new and becoming more virtual is important. I also think I mentioned the word compassionate. One of the things that we're really trying to stress with our teams, and this is actually in our work from home guide, our guidance to teams and projects about how do you work virtually. It's about being passionate for the other individuals, because working from home, sleeping at work, it's hard. It's taking a toll. It's especially taking a toll on our parents who have to work from home and take care of their small kids who are also doing virtual learning and have needs and stuff like that. So I think being flexible around other people's work, being compassionate, understanding what they're going through, and trying to find ways, Gary said serendipitously, right? Trying to find ways to connect through happy hours or whatever. I've got 2 happy hours this evening with some of my teams I'm excited about. We'll start Wednesday night early, but I think those are the things, the people side, right? We need to think about that as well. And I know Carmen was emphasizing the same.
Great. I have another question from the audience, and it is, do your companies have recommendations for how to manage the digital divide that some communities are seeing, i.e. connectivity deserts in some neighborhoods or rural areas. What's the solution? I'm going to start with you, Gary.
You know, that always boils down to what we call in technology the last mile, right? And the last mile has always been our hardest to solve. And so we have to figure out things, and I don't know if we're there yet, but like for some seniors, we might have to dual the homes with a cable and another fiber product or something like that. I think the first thing is, how do we get everybody connected? And you're right, there are some rural communities where they're dependent on cellular. And as you can tell, there are certain products that just don't work well over cellular. There are certain products that don't work well over Wi-Fi. You need to be hardwired connected and things like that. I don't know if we have an answer to that yet, because we can't change the infrastructure in some of these communities during COVID, right? But we need to figure this out. I know even the New York school system went through a little bit of this about, there were people who they were able to give laptops to so that they could e-learn, but they had no Wi-Fi connection.
Right.
And so they gave them access points and those little, what did we used to call them? Those little things that we used to carry around to connect to cellular. So I don't think we have a clear solution on this. I think it's something that we have to figure out. I think the whole work from home model, we have to figure out, do we give away laptops? Do we give screens out? How do we set people up? Are people still sitting on the couch? Do people now have to figure out, I need a dedicated place to work? Because we're moving a little bit from, I think one of the colleagues mentioned it, it was okay when the cats crossed the screen, right? But we are moving to another stage now where you need a dedicated space so you can focus and work, because we are back at work.
Right.
But solving that last mile and how to set people up at home, I put those both in the same category. I think companies are still, they're throwing technology and money at it. And I think we need to sit back and figure out a real plan. I know in our company, we give you a laptop, we give you a keyboard, we give you a monitor, so you don't have to worry about those costs and things like that. I think other companies are starting to follow that suit. Too many companies thought this was a snow day. And this is not a snow day exercise. This is a global BCP exercise. And nobody was ready to send all the employees and all the clients home at the same time.
Great. Michael?
Yeah, I think if I could build on that last mile. So I have, like probably many in the audience right now, I've got a high school senior who's working on her college applications. And it was great to see that many of the colleges are making a lot of those big tests, like the ACT or the SAT, optional this year, and you can self-report your scores. And it's just a very different feel from what even my college-age kids had a couple of years ago. So I think there's a recognition, as we talked about last night, we talked about people in socially disadvantaged or socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, right? How do we give them access through schools and stuff like that? I wanted to just twist the question, because I built systems, right? And so we are seeing some of the smarter agencies, especially state agencies or transit authorities, there's another last mile for you, are really cognizant of how do we make sure that the technology experience works for people who are unbanked, works for people who don't have high-speed internet at their home. So for example, we're working with the transit authority up in Canada, where they used to use, a card, like the old Ventra card days, where you use your card to go through the turnstiles and swipe and all that. They're moving towards being able to use all sorts of things, whether it's an Apple Watch, which I understand is an expensive mechanism, but a cell phone, right, which, as Gary says, a lot of people in rural areas have, being able to use those ways of interacting. And that's another way I think we're going to be able to reach more equitably a broader audience.
Carmen, anything you want to add to that?
I would say ultimately there's some public policy involved in this, which is beyond the scope of this conversation. The reason I say that is because companies can solve for the hardware issues, even if it's expensive for them. But for example, I live in Arlington, Virginia, and here in the schools, they've given laptops to every single high school student, and they've given the Wi-Fi extenders. The public libraries are not open, but you can go and use their Wi-Fi. And they struck a deal with Comcast that if you didn't have Wi-Fi in your home, that they would give you Wi-Fi for the school year. So the schools have been kind of the way that, but I was out in rural Virginia not that long ago, and there's literally like a little country store that says all the high school kids come and use our Wi-Fi. So I'm not sure that companies can solve, because that last mile in rural parts of the country could be $10,000, $60,000. Like, a company can't solve that. So unfortunately, I think that's outside of the purview of this conversation, but they can certainly solve some of the hardware challenges that people have.
And I do think, just to plus onto that, we see a lot of companies building hub locations outside of the metro areas.
Yeah.
So we can get like she said, you can sit outside of the library and still use the library Wi-Fi. You just can't go inside the library. And we lived through Sandy in New York. And one of the things people did is they camped outside of the Starbucks. Because Starbucks, while they weren't open, still had their Wi-Fi's on. And we were able to get standing outside. And it was like almost trying to find a place with a plug to charge your phone. So I think we are being creative, but you're right. I think it's something that we have to solve on a better macro level.
Another question, Carmen, I'm going to start with you. Question came in, says, what would each of you consider as your biggest success of this remote work period? Carmen?
Biggest success. Well, we were lucky because we were actually a remote company to begin with. So the transition to remote work wasn't all that difficult for us. I think the biggest success was helping some of our clients through it, because we had a couple that were really struggling with like an existential crisis, but more of them were in this place of like, I don't know how to prioritize this and how to get this done. So I would say the biggest professional success was helping them get prioritized and like, what'll kill you now versus what can you put off 6 months, and really get it organized around that. I would be remiss if I said also getting a kid off to college and a teenager actually doing high school at home was also a huge success. That's a work in progress though.
Michael?
So when the pandemic first hit, right, Congress came out with the Stimulus and CARES Act, which set aside money for small businesses so that they could sort of keep the doors open. They could continue paying rent, pay their employees, even if the doors weren't actually physically open. So really meaningful, important stuff for our neighborhoods. And we very quickly built a SaaS, a platform, in this case on top of Salesforce, that would allow 5 of our banking clients provide this new SBA, Small Business Administration product or loan to customers very quickly. And we did the whole project virtually. We had 600 people assembled because we had to do this in days, not weeks, not months, that sort of thing. But we came up with the idea internally, virtually. We approached banks virtually over teleconference to explain what we're planning to do. We assembled our teams virtually. We did everything in the cloud, ServiceNow, Salesforce, all of our development, some Amazon Web Services stuff. We tested it in the cloud. We went live in the cloud. We made changes in the cloud. We operated it all virtually and in the cloud. And so I think that was some really cool technology work, but ultimately that was very meaningful to the thousands of loans that got processed through that system. So that'll be a good memory for me from this pandemic.
Great. Well, Gary, I'm sure you have lots of stories, but pick one.
I mean, look, keeping our clients connected was important and rewarding. Keeping kids learning in school was important. Keeping telehealth going and really giving it a good kick in the right place was important. But I think if I got to look back 10 years from now, and I got to say, keeping families connected. I think we discounted the whole time here that family connection was very important during this. I know my mom is 4 hours away, and keeping connected over products like Zoom, I think that got us through, because it's great to be able to talk to my work colleagues, but absence of family was was hard. And to be just as connected, right? Using the same tools we use all day long. Like Michael, you said you have 2 happy hours, right? Maybe one of them's personal, one of them's business. I have one today that's personal, right? I think that at the end of the day, we had a newborn in the family the other day, and every family had a Zoom call last night, right from the hospital, right? Because no one can go. But you know what? We were part of it. And so I think that's the part that really, if I got to look back 10 years from now, is the success of keeping people connected is probably the part you're going to remember, past the business side of our lives.
Great. We have one last question and then we'll wrap up. What tips do you have for business development and client relationship building during this time? How have you done this in a meaningful way, especially if it's new relationships with clients you haven't met in person? Carmen, I'm going to start with you because your business is really hands-on and integrating, business processes, which is all about the people.
So first thing I'll say is that it's not like this has not been hard, especially March and April. I mean, March and April was like a total shock to the system. Pretty quickly after that, though, as people started to adopt technology, they started doing their day to day. So having business development conversations, even with people that you don't know, did get a little bit easier because everyone was in the same boat. And all of a sudden, I think it was you, Gary, that said, they realized it wasn't a snow day. And as they realized it wasn't a snow day, they kind of got on board. Gary and I actually have a mutual connection. Somebody that works with me, one of my partners, was a former colleague of Gary's at JP Morgan. And it was funny, we had an offline conversation not long ago, and Gary had some great suggestions for how people should be disseminating their work through the YouTubes and the Zooms of the world so that folks can come to them. I will also say that we've shifted more to putting out a lot more content so that people know who we are, and trying to drive as much of an inbound strategy as we are an outbound strategy, because we know people have this problem, but the one-to-one doesn't work as well in a virtual world as it does in the physical world. And that's just reality. So I think that's true of everyone. And we're kind of, there's a lot of flexibility in learning, and you try something and it doesn't work and you try something else. But we are starting to see business pick up, because now that everybody realizes this is just going to be the way it is, they're kind of getting on board.
Michael?
Yes, Sheila, I think people get it. I like those points. And Carmen, I want to build on your point about content. I obviously, if you want to connect with another human being, and people buy from people they trust, and so you got to do it on video and try to connect in virtual happy hours as best you can. But I also, it's just been my personal experience, I don't know if this is true more broadly, that I think that if you have a good point of view and you've thought through the clients or customers' problems, and you have some ideas and you're listening to their problems and you have some solutions and you have content, right? To use Carmen's word, I think that helps quickly build credibility to help with business development efforts. So you obviously still need to be a person that they can like and be on Zoom and have discussions with them and all that stuff. But I also think coming prepared and asking questions, as all good salespeople do, right? But I think that's more relevant than ever.
Gary, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so playing off content is, we went through a stage where there were no new TV shows, and we had maxed out on Netflix, and there was no new content. The problem is, in the business world, we've developed a lot of content. I don't know, but I probably get invited to several sessions a week. There's always content coming our way. People aren't really watching it. A lot of us you probably got 30 mails today about content, and you'll watch that same movie on Netflix for the fourth time, right? Before you'll go and watch, an HBR or a Gartner content. I think the thing today is people need to figure out what their clients need and want, use technology in an effective way, right? And present content in a very unique way. This way people are getting there. We haven't seen like this big blow up of TED Talks, which were designed to be short, informative, type of conversations, right? And so you almost need to invent yourself and say, hey, look, these are Gary Talks, they're 15 minutes long. I'm going to talk in bullets, not sentences. You're going to get a lot of content in a very little amount of time. And so what I think the companies who are uniquely presenting their content in a format that people can digest it quickly, because we think very quickly. On stage, we're okay listening to someone for 45 minutes. A single speaker, 45 minutes on video is a nightmare. Right. And so I think people need to rethink that to re-engage with their clients. And the tools like Zoom, they have creative ways to do it. Carmen and I actually had a conversation about this a short time ago about there are different ways to present content where people would like the experience as well as the content. So it was a good use of my time. It was a pleasurable experience, and I learned a lot. And if you can come up with great content like that, I think you should broadcast it. And on Zoom, not to be selfish, but on Zoom is coming out. It's called On Zoom, is a new platform for people who can do different things like teach people how to play the piano, yoga, put out some of this content and things like that, but in a very unique way. And I think that that's really important today, because while we say we need content in our personal lives, we have overload of content in our professional lives right now. And it's not all good content.
Great. Well, as a final wrap up, I want to ask each of you to give your thoughts on what the #1 most valuable technology development has been over the course of 2020 and why it is important. So Gary, I'm going to start with you.
Wow. So I'll have to answer something besides video. No, but I do think, look, video conferencing has taken a step forward. since the pandemic. It has become mainstay. It has become vital. I think there are a lot of new functionalities that's coming out into video conferencing, which is helping people use it in a much different way. So let's forget the video conferencing pre-pandemic, because that was just a tool. Right now, video conferences become a lifestyle. And I think that companies that are using it creatively, trying to figure out, there are some people who use video conferencing like Zoom in a much better way with their families than they do at work. They've learned all the bells and the whistles and the tools and how to move people around and how to present in a better way. But I think video will go down as probably one of the, before video was as aggressive as it is now, I don't think we could have had this pandemic as, and I don't want to say successful, but we got through this pandemic with the use of things like video. And 10 years ago, if we had this pandemic, I don't know if we would have been where we are now.
Michael?
The most valuable technology of 2020 is also the most unused technology of 2020, and that's the off button. We need to be spending more time off as well and doing like Carmen said. I'm now inspired. I got to go for a walk today, Carmen. Thank you for reminding me. Get out of the damn house. So I feel like technology has been great in connecting us, but we also need to know when to turn it off. There you go.
Great. Carmen, closing thoughts?
I'm not saying this because Gary's here. I think it's video. I mean, hands down, like, and the acceleration of the sophistication, the security aspects of it, all of that sort of stuff is shocking over the last 6 months. And I told Gary this, we've actually been using Zoom as a company for 3.5 years, but nobody had even heard of it. And then all of a sudden the whole world had by like May. So, but I also kind of agree with Michael. Sometimes I'm like, I just got to get away from it all. And actually my business partner and I have gone back to doing phone calls and not video calls because we're so tired all day long of the video part that we do phone calls. So
great.
There you have it.
Thank you all so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark for some closing remarks. Mark, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Definitely wanted to make sure I was the second person to do that today. So we're at the end of our time. I'd like to thank our panelists, Carmen, Gary, and Michael. I thought the discussion today was outstanding. And a big thanks to Sheila, our moderator. It's always tough to do this virtually, and it was extremely well done, so thank you. We really appreciate your time with us today, and would also like to thank all of you who turned in for this conversation. We do miss seeing you all in person, but I hope that you are all staying safe. For members of the Executives Club, we hope you can join us for a brief discussion group following this program. And if you would like to join and did not yet RSVP, you can contact Megan Chickarell for the Zoom information. She will be dropping her email into the chat box now or very soon. We hope you found this information helpful to carry you through the rest of your week. Keep an eye on the Executives Club website for more upcoming virtual programs. In particular, we hope you can join us for our next Professional Services Forum event tomorrow, October 29th, which will be an interactive workshop about creating wellness routines and building resilience as we continue to navigate this phase of the pandemic. You can sign up online at executivesclub.org. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks again for joining us, and see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.